Um, I mean, no, I'm not. But I mean, that you know what? That's fine. You can have a difference of opinion here. Um, but you're also like going against the scientific like consensus about what I am. So you just have to understand that you're against science and that you're pathetically small-minded in your masculinity, okay? Like it's just okay, you're a Nazi. I mean, like I like the fact that you're at least honest, the Bay Area Army man. I like the fact that you're at least honest about what you are. I appreciate that about you. And actually, you're wrong. There is a scientific consensus. That's why doctors prescribe things based on science. If you're a doctor, you can't prescribe something that isn't based on the scientific consensus among doctors. Um, yeah, but I mean, people don't gender other people based on their chromosomes. Like, do you ever go around and give people DNA tests in order to determine what their pronouns are before you gender them? Because I don't think you do. I don't think you do that because people would be uh, probably punch you in the face. It would probably be a violent altercation. And also, I don't think you give people like it's just not a normal thing to give people blood tests before you talk to them like a human being. And also, it's you don't pull down everybody's pants before you talk to them and gender them correctly. So like, I mean, factually, you're incorrect as well. Them has been a they them has been like an acceptable pronoun in English for longer than he him or she her. So they is actually like a much more acceptable pronoun if you're going to root yourself in the grand Western tradition of English. Um, I mean, no, I'm pretty sure I'm a human being. But like you're just arguing from feelings, and it's pretty funny actually. I appreciate you coming in here and at least being honest about what your ideology is. Most people just waste my time. Um, why come in here and attack someone over who they are, dude? You lost your humanity when Goldstein did the reconstructive surgery. My friend, I haven't done any surgeries, so there's your first problem. Um, but you know, secondly, you're kind of just making all of these wild assumptions, which is ironic considering that in your everyday life, you're constantly making assumptions about what other people's genders are. Chances are, if you've met more than 100 people in your life, or more than 1,000 people in your life, you've met a transgender person face to face and you didn't know it. Um, Turns out we're not all very all that visible in society. But you know, the fact that you didn't know that they were trans comes completely from the fact that they didn't announce it to you, and it just kind of proves that you don't know what you're talking about when you talk about gender. Um, yeah, Archangel Decab, he's making the implication that Jews are rich and powerful and control the like the world. You know, he's talking about the Jewish question in his own little Nazi way. They like to do that, you know. Um, it's pretty silly, but Nazis in general are silly. Like they don't have good arguments for their positions. Like I'm sure all the redistributive taxation policies are going into your surgery. No, actually. So I'm saving up for it myself, friend. Um, you're kind of just like making a bunch of wild assumptions about me in an attempt to get a rise, and I can tell you that like you're not going to get the rise you're looking for because I think that you're really pathetic and funny. And I enjoy talking to people like you because your ideas don't make sense and your arguments are bad. So, like, you can keep making your arguments, but just understand that they're bad and they're coming just from a place of, like, either being afraid that you might be attracted to a trans person or, like, from, like, this knee jerk level of disgust because of something you don't understand and haven't experienced, which I find kind of sad. Like, I hope you get over it eventually because it's a horrible way to live your life in like that constant state of like fear and reactionaryism. Um, but like, it's I hope you get help. Like, it would be nice if you became better, you know? Um, I mean, I'm not particularly interested in the IQ of the Nazis because IQ is a bullshit means of measuring intelligence. So I don't understand why you would put credence in that. Um, like if you were actually someone who believed science, you would understand that IQ has long been considered a poor means of measuring intelligence. Um, I mean, I do have depression. I do struggle with depression and anxiety. So in that regards, I do have mental illnesses, but other than that, I'm actually pretty mentally sound. Um, yeah, I mean, like La Mama, like conservatives are constantly arguing from a place of fear and misunderstanding. And like the fact that like for example, from the Bay Area Army man, um from the Bay Area my man. Wait, Bay Area, yeah, Bay Area my man. He just kind of arguing from his feelings. And like he can't present like a good argument about facts of any kind. And whatever facts he does get are going to be filtered through his Nazi friends. So like there'll be sources that like don't exist anymore, or he'll probably be drawing from the Library of Hate or something like that. Like all of the information they have is just uh, bad, and the arguments they base that information on are also bad. So like, I mean, no, race isn't real. Like 60 years ago, people considered people from the Middle East white. We don't consider them white anymore, do we? Um, Race is just a social construct that changes over time. The Romans thought that anyone who was a citizen was civilized, anyone who was not a citizen was not, and that was their concept of race as far as they were concerned. So, like, the idea of what race means and what race is changes drastically over time, and anyone who has remotely studied any history would know that. And guess what? I have studied history, so I can argue from a place of knowledge in that front. Um, oh, did were there death threats? Oh, that's sad. My dude, you can't be issuing death threats on this platform. You should you should know that. You should know that your death threats should only be limited to your 4chan sites and the other wretched, scummy places you like to hang out. Um, so yeah, just go do that and like jack off about how much you hate trans women while looking at like trans porn or something like that. Like it's okay. We're not gonna judge you for that. Like I do hope you get help though. That'd be nice. I do like arguing with transphobes though. Because like I said, their arguments are usually really bad. Um, yes, Natalie Mars, very attractive lady. Um, but yeah, basically like these people, these transphobes, they have terrible arguments. Like, do you walk around and pull people's pants down to inspect their genitals before you call them a man or a woman? No. Do you give everyone you meet a DNA test to make sure they're XX or XY? No, you don't. And like the idea that those are the two things that are used to determine what your gender is laughable because you don't actually act like those are the things that designate what someone's gender is because that's not how we designate gender. It's just not. On a practical level, it's not. Um, so like it's just it comes from like this weird place of thinking that they're entitled to live in a world where they can assume what genitals other people have, and that's really weird to me on like a conceptual level, right? Um, yeah, it's real silly stuff that they peddle, and like those are their only arguments really about trans people, and like it always comes down to that, and it's just like, but you don't live like that in your everyday life. Like most of the people who talk about like, oh, your XY chromosomes or whatever probably have never had a DNA test themselves. And you know why that's a problem? Because there are a number of genetic conditions that can arise that affect how your XX or XY chromosomes um, affect your development. So there are some people who look uh, like cis women who actually have XY chromosomes. There are some people who look like cis men who have XX chromosomes. And the reason they look in these different ways and have different genitalia is because how they developed and like how hormones entered their systems while going through, puberty or development drastically affected their bodies. So like you don't know, like I'm guessing I'm going to go out on a limb. Most of the people watching right now don't actually know what their own chromosomes are. So like the idea that that's the basis that we have for what our genders are is ridiculous. Um, Likewise with genitalia, like you're just not going around pulling people's pants down to see what their genitals are. You're just not. And if you are, you should probably be arrested. Like that's something that should probably happen to you. Um, yeah, every wall will fall. Like there's this like if it when you really dive into the biological science of like how sex um like arises in humans, there are a huge spectrum of differences that exist within chromosomes themselves and how people develop as human beings. In fact, there are a lot of people who are born intersex who never know. There are a lot of people who have these various genetic conditions who just don't know because like why would you test for it? Like it's just not something that comes up for a lot of people. Um, like there are people like who live their lives as like cis men and then like in their 50s need to get hysterectomies because like they didn't realize it but they had some sort of um issue growing up that changed their body and had them grow an unwanted or unneeded womb inside of them. Like that happens. So like genetics are way more complicated than what most people learned in their fourth grade biology class. Turns out pretty wild. Um, and yeah, even just within XXXY, there are also additional chromosomes that sometimes get added in. Like Archangel Decab is saying you can also be XXX, you can also be X, you can be XXY. There are all kinds of different combinations. So are we saying that people who have those additional chromosomes are completely different genders? Usually we're not, actually. So like clearly that's not how gender works. But that's why debating transphobes on this issue is so funny and like fulfilling to me, because most of them don't know this stuff and have like a very rudimentary understanding of what gender is and what the science behind sex is. And so like they build up their entire Nazi ideology on like this idea of what gender is, and it's all based on faulty science that stopped advancing in the 1930s because they consider like Nazis the pinnacle of achievement, right? Like um and so in that sense I think it's fairly obvious to make them look very silly in prolonged conversation um and talking about things like that. Like that guy brought up IQ in Nazi Germany. IQ is a horrible means of determining intelligence in people, largely because a lot of the time, um, intelligence, like for example, it was given like IQ tests were given to people in Africa, and a lot of people in Africa hadn't been educated to take tests, and so they did poorly on the tests because of course they did. So like we're constantly developing better ways to test people for intelligence, and IQ is just a ridiculously outdated way of doing that. Um, and Also, Africa is rapidly industrializing and is rapidly improving its educational systems, and yeah, turns out a lot of the implications of low IQ countries as it relates to race, which is he was talking about race realism. Turns out a lot of that is actually due to improvements in their education systems and investments in education. So turns out it doesn't really have anything to do with race. It has much more to do with environmental factors like education funding. Um, so if we fund education more, we get smarter people, essentially. That's what the science tells us. But what Nazis take from it is that, oh, race is real because they don't consider the context that you know disproportionately in the United States, for example, black families are on average likely to be have 1/40th the wealth of white families. Um, so like things like that drastically affect education, especially when in the United States, education is tied to property taxes. And if you have 1/40th the amount of wealth, that means your schools are also getting 1/40th the amount of funding. So inner city schools tend to do worse on these tests as well. Yeah, Gringo Nut. Turns out when you exploit the hell out of a continent for hundreds of years, they're gonna lag behind a bit. It's weird. Weird how that turns out. Yeah, like IQ was intended for use in like local schools, not as a way to determine race intelligence. If we treat everyone equally, everyone has would have an equal opportunity to succeed. Yeah, and I would even go beyond that. We should treat everyone equitably, because different people need different amounts of help in order to succeed. Whether that's because of a disability or because of other reasons. I think we should give everyone an equal opportunity to succeed, and not only that, that we should give people the support to pursue their passions, and like really dedicate themselves to things that they like doing. And also, I think we should remove the coercive element of capital that means that you either work or you die. I think that that would improve society quite a bit.